There is a sentence you have said to yourself so many times that you have stopped hearing it. Not yet, not this year. When things settle down, you have a version of your life that you are not living. You know its shape fairly well. There is work in it that you would be proud of, and a body you take care of, and people you actually call instead of meaning to call. It is not an extravagant life. It is not a fantasy of wealth or fame. It is a quieter thing than that, and somehow that makes it worse. Because you know it is available, you are not waiting for luck. You are waiting for a moment that has not come yet, a clearing in the schedule, a season with less pressure in it, and you have been waiting for that clearing for a very long time. And every so often, usually late, usually when you are too tired to defend yourself, the arithmetic surfaces. You notice how quickly the last 5 years went. You notice that the person you were going to become was supposed to have arrived by now, and a cold feeling moves through you, and you push it down because there is work tomorrow, and because the feeling has no obvious action attached to it. So you set the alarm and you go to sleep, and in the morning the sentence is waiting where you left it. Not yet. When things settle down, almost everything written about this feeling treats it as a scheduling problem. You are told to wake up earlier, to batch your tasks, to protect your mornings, to say no more often. The advice is not wrong exactly. It is simply aimed at the wrong target. It assumes that the reason you are not living your life is that you have not yet found the spare hours, and that if you could just locate them somewhere behind the email and the commute, you would spend them on the things that matter. But you have found spare hours before. You know what happened to them. 2,000 years ago, a Roman named Lucius Annaeus Seneca sat down to write a letter to a man who was complaining about exactly this, and he opened with a claim so blunt that it still lands like an accusation. Most people, he said, complain about the meanness of nature because we are born for such a short span, because the time we are given rushes by so fast that apart from a very few, life ends just as we are getting ready to live. And then he refused the complaint entirely. It is not, he wrote, that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and it has been given in sufficiently generous measure to accomplish the greatest things if the whole of it is well invested. We are not given a short life. We make it short. Sit with how strange that is. Every instinct you have says the opposite. Your calendar says the opposite. The exhaustion in your shoulders says the opposite. You are not idle. You are one of the busiest people you know. And Seneca, looking directly at you across 2,000 years, says that this is precisely the problem, and that busyness is not the opposite of a wasted life, but the most reliable form of one. To understand why, you have to understand what he thought we were actually doing with our hours. Seneca noticed that we guard our property with real ferocity. Nobody hands over their money to a stranger without a second thought. Nobody lets another person take their land, or their house, or the contents of their bank account simply because that person asked politely. And yet, he said, there is no one who is willing to distribute their money while everyone divides up their life We are tight-fisted with what can be replaced and careless with the one thing that cannot be. You would fight a man who stole a year's wages from you. You will not even inconvenience the man who takes a year. He gave that person a name, the preoccupied man, and he did not mean the lazy one. The preoccupied man is not the one lying on the couch. He is the one who is never not doing something, whose days are entirely consumed by obligations he never quite chose, who is so thoroughly engaged with the machinery of living that he has never once turned to look at the life the machinery was supposed to serve. He is busy in the way a river is busy. Something is always moving. Nothing is going anywhere he decided on, and here is Seneca's sharpest observation about him. The preoccupied man lives entirely in the future. He is always arranging, always preparing, always laying the ground for a satisfaction that is scheduled to arrive later. He postpones. That is his defining act. And postponement, Seneca said, is the greatest waste of life, because it takes away the present day by promising the future, the one thing you actually have, in exchange for a thing that does not exist. You already know this is true, because you have watched it happen in a smaller form. You have finished something you worked toward for years, and felt the satisfaction last about 4 days before the next arrangement quietly took its place. The clearing arrives. It does not feel like a clearing. It feels like a gap that should be filled, and so you fill it, and the waiting resumes. And there is a reason this is so hard to see in yourself, which Seneca understood better than almost anyone who has written about it since. Postponement does not feel like avoidance. It feels like responsibility. When you decide that this is not the year for the thing you actually want, you do not experience that as cowardice. You experience it as maturity. You are being realistic. You have obligations. There are people depending on you, and bills that arrive whether or not you are living the life you meant to live, and it would be selfish, or at least premature, to put your own thing first, while all of that is unresolved. The postponement arrives dressed as the most admirable quality you have. Seneca saw this and refused to be moved by it. He wrote about men who were universally admired, whose calendars were full of important business, whose lives were spent entirely in the service of other people's needs, and he called them the most wretched of all because they had never once been in possession of themselves. He said that everyone hustles their life along and is troubled by a longing for the future and weariness of the present. He noticed that the busiest men are the ones most desperate for their own lives to be over quickly, forever waiting for the next stage, and that they would be horrified if you said it to them plainly. And then the line that is very hard to read twice. The one who has been engaged in everything, he wrote, has been engaged in nothing. So notice what your own postponement is wearing. If it looks like laziness, you would have dealt with it years ago. It does not look like laziness. It looks like duty, and it looks like patience, and it looks like waiting for the right moment, and those are all things you have been praised for. That is exactly why it has survived this long. So the postponed life is not caused by a lack of time, it is caused by a relationship to time. And the relationship is this: You are treating your life as though it were infinite, in the one way that actually matters, which is that you believe there will be more of it later, and that later will be better suited to living than now is. Seneca thought almost everyone does this, and that the reason is not stupidity but a kind of protective blindness. You do not really believe you are going to die. Intellectually you do. You would put money on it. But you do not organize your afternoons like a person who believes it. He wrote that people live as if they were destined to live forever, and no thought of human fragility ever enters their heads, and they arrange their lives on a very long expectation, while all the time that day which they are giving away is the last. Which brings us to a Roman emperor writing to nobody at night in a military camp. Marcus Aurelius kept a private notebook that was never meant to be read, and much of it is a man arguing with himself about this exact difficulty. He had every possible excuse to postpone. He was administering an empire, fighting a war on the northern frontier, burying children, and what he keeps returning to, over and over, in different words, is a single observation so simple that it slides off the mind on the first hearing. You can only ever lose the present moment, because that is the only thing you have. He works it out carefully. The past is gone and cannot be taken from you, because it is no longer yours. The future is not yours yet, so it cannot be taken either. What death removes, when it comes, is only this, the moment currently in your hands. And therefore the longest life and the shortest life lose exactly the same thing, because the present is all that anyone possesses. Now, this can be read as consolation, and it is often sold that way. But that is not how Marcus used it. He used it as an argument against delay. If the present is the only thing you will ever hold, then the future you are saving yourself for is not a place you will eventually arrive at. It is a place that does not exist, and that has never existed, and that will not exist when it gets here, because when it gets here it will be a present moment, and you will be standing in it with the same mind you have now, running the same postponement. The person who says they will live properly when things settle down is not waiting for a date on the calendar. They are waiting for a different self. 1800 years later, a difficult German philosopher named Martin Heidegger took this apart with a precision that is worth the effort of following. He noticed something odd about how we talk about death. We say, everyone dies. It is the most universal fact there is, and he pointed out that the way we say it is a trick. When we say everyone dies, we mean, in practice, one dies. Some anonymous person, eventually. It is an event that happens in the world, to people, in hospitals, in the news, and that framing, which sounds like acceptance, is actually the most sophisticated avoidance we have built, because it converts your death into a general fact about the population, which is a fact you can acknowledge all day without it ever touching how you spend Tuesday. Heidegger's demand was that you take it back, not death as a statistic, your death, the one that ends this specific stream of experience, the one nobody can do on your behalf, the one that cannot be delegated. He called living in awareness of that being toward death, and he thought it was not morbid at all. He thought it was the only thing that makes a life your own, because here is what he saw. Most of the time we do not choose our lives. We absorb them. We do what one does. One gets the degree, one takes the job, one is supposed to want this by now. He called that anonymous authority the they, and its power is that it never announces itself. Nobody ever told you to want the life you are currently arranging. You caught it, the way you catch an accent. And what breaks that spell, he argued, is the honest recognition that your time is finite and non-transferable. Because the moment a life is genuinely limited, the question of what to spend it on stops being abstract. Priorities do not have to be imposed. They surface on their own. You already know this, because you have seen what happens to people who receive a diagnosis. The trivia falls away in an afternoon, not through discipline, through clarity. The Stoics had a practice for this that predates all of it, and Montaigne, 16 centuries later, made it the center of his own thinking. To philosophize, he said, is to learn how to die. And he did not mean to rehearse dying, he meant something closer to this. Keep the fact near enough that it stays real, and it will do the sorting for you, quietly, continuously, without you having to become a more disciplined person, which is the turn I want to leave you with. Notice that not one of these thinkers told you to do more. Seneca did not tell the preoccupied man to get up earlier. Marcus did not build a system. Heidegger did not offer a method. Every one of them is doing the same thing, which is trying to interrupt a single false belief, the belief that there will be a better time than now, and that the version of you living in it will be a better person than the one reading this. There will not be. There is only ever this, arriving continuously, at a rate you cannot change and in an amount you cannot know. So the question is not how to find more hours. You have been looking for those for years, and you have found some, and you know what became of them. The question Seneca actually asks, and it is much harder, is simpler than it sounds, and it does not require a free weekend to answer. What are you postponing? And what exactly are you waiting for? Be specific, not the vague list. The one real thing you have moved forward, quarter after quarter, that you would be ashamed to admit you have been deferring, because the reason you have been deferring it is not time. If it were time, you would have done it during one of the clearings. The reason is something else, and you probably already know its name. And Seneca's whole point is that the years will keep passing whether or not you say it out loud. Life is long enough. That was his claim, and he meant it literally. Long enough for the greatest things. If the whole of it is well invested, you are not running out of time. You are spending it on a future that is never going to arrive, and the price of that mistake is the only thing you have ever actually owned, which is this afternoon, and this one, and this one. Thank you for staying with me. If something in this landed, sit with it before you move on to the next thing, because moving on to the next thing is precisely the habit we have just spent 20 minutes taking apart. I will see you in the next one.